Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into the Ley Espía, the spy law. It was recently approved by the Mexican Congress, June 26, 2025. And, well, it sparked a really heated debate. For good reason, I think.
Right. And what's particularly striking here is how this legislation is attempting to sort of walk a tightrope. It's seeking to balance national security needs with, fundamental individual privacy.
Yeah, that's the classic tension, isn't it?
It is. But the big question really is whether that balance is truly achievable here or if it maybe errs too heavily on one side.
So the law's stated aim is fighting high-impact crimes, things like extortion, kidnapping, really serious stuff affecting communities. But here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. It grants Mexico's Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection, the SSPC, and the National Guard pretty sweeping access.
Sweeping access, yeah, to incredibly sensitive personal data.
Exactly. We're talking biometric fingerprints, facial scans, that kind of thing, banking records.
Medical records, too, even property details.
And, crucial for our digital age, telecommunications metadata. So, not the content of your calls, but who you called, when, for how long, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And this access, it's stated, on paper at least, is under judicial oversight.
Right. On paper is maybe the key phrase there. We'll come back to that.
And building on that point about data access, this law isn't just about what they can see, it's also about the new infrastructure being built. The Ley Espía establishes a central intelligence platform. It's expected to be up and running by the end of 2025.
The central hub for all this data.
Essentially, yes. And it also formalizes a new Subsecretariat of Intelligence and Police Investigation, which significantly expands the National Guard's intelligence gathering powers. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it really signals a substantial shift.
A shift towards what exactly?
Towards a much more centralized, data-driven security apparatus within the Mexican government.
Okay. So what does all this mean for, your rights and freedoms as a citizen, or even just someone interacting digitally in Mexico? Proponents, mainly from the ruling Morena party, argue it's absolutely essential. You need these tools to fight these terrible crimes.
Which is a compelling argument on the surface. These are serious issues.
Absolutely. But critics, and this includes major opposition parties like PAN and PRI, plus many human rights experts, they're sounding the alarm. They're warning of a clear slide toward mass surveillance, maybe even potential authoritarianism.
And that's where the past really casts a long shadow. The core concern isn't just the law in theory, but its potential for misuse, especially, given Mexico's documented history of surveillance abuses. This isn't just theoretical.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. We've seen specific proven instances, like the government's use of Pegasus spyware that's been happening since around 2011. It was used against journalists, against activists, exposed their sources, put people in danger.
And created a chilling effect, presumably.
Definitely. A chilling effect on reporting critical information. And remember, there was also a 2012 law that granted warrantless access to location data.
Warrantless. Wow.
Yeah. So there's a precedent for unchecked government power in this area. That history makes this current debate about the Ley Espía feel, acutely sensitive for many people.
And that brings us back to the judicial oversight point. You mentioned it's required on paper.
Correct.
But critics argue it might not be sufficient. Why is that?
Well, there are long-standing concerns about judicial independence in Mexico, concerns often tied to political influence or maybe past instances where the judiciary hasn't effectively checked executive power.
So the worry is the oversight might just be a rubber stamp.
That's the fear, that it could lead to arbitrary data access, essentially bypassing the intended safeguards.
Which could potentially violate your constitutional rights. The right to privacy, the inviolability of communications, basic stuff.
Exactly. And it could also deepen that chilling effect on free speech we talked about. People might just self-censor, afraid that every digital move, every call, every search is being scrutinized.
So, stepping back a bit, this Ley Espía, it seems like it's part of a bigger trend.
It really does appear to be part of a broader, perhaps more worrying pattern, an increase in government surveillance capabilities in Mexico. It marks a pretty significant shift, potentially irreversible, toward greater state control over digital communications. It's fundamentally redefining the relationship between the government and its citizens' digital lives.
So our deep dive into the Ley Espía, it clearly shows this really complex, evolving tension, doesn't it? Between a nation's security needs, which are legitimate, and the fundamental civil liberties of its citizens.
Absolutely. It's a balance that's incredibly difficult to strike correctly.
Okay, maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on.
Sure. Here's something provocative to consider. As our societies embrace digital tools more and more, and governments understandably seek expanded powers for security, how do we truly ensure that these measures don't end up eroding the very freedoms they're supposed to protect? Especially when those lines of oversight, the checks and balances, become blurred or worse, just ineffective. That's the core question, I think.